Welcome to this EGU webinar on how science and artists landed on the moon. It is in collaboration with Space Pride and the Interstellar Foundation, whose representatives here today. A quick apology that one of our speakers, Walt, will be unable to make it, but we still have a representative from the Interstellar Foundation, Jenna Sierra, who might be jumping in at a few points to provide some information. Otherwise, I'll move on to our representatives from Space Pride. But before I do, I'll quickly introduce myself. So I'm Simon Clark. I work at the European Geosciences Union in the Executive Office, where I oversee development, including community development, organizational development, but more particularly, I'm also a science communicator and also been an LGBT, I suppose, activist myself, having firmly set up a charity and also worked in science art as well. So my interests here are kind of amalgam between EGU's work, LGBT inclusion, and also my own science art. But I'll also now pass on to our representatives. We'll start with Ray. Could you introduce yourself to our audience members, please?
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you, Simon, for making this webinar happen in the first place, because loved getting that cheeky little Instagram message and being like, hey, do we need to collaborate? Of course we do. Yes, hello everyone. My name is Ray. I go by she, her, and I am Space Prize Operations Director. So essentially, I help oversee the smooth runnings of the different specialized committees that we have at Space Pride, and yeah, make sure that they all happen, activities are going well, and that we have clear and transparent communication between board and volunteers and community. In my, well, beyond putting art on the moon, I'm a third-year PhD candidate at the University of Edinburgh, and not at all a STEM person. I essentially look at the regulation of space debris re-entries and its environmental impact from a perspective of law. So my PhD is law-focused, but in my free time, I like being a bit of a artiste, hobbyist, if anything, making digital art, creating things creatively. Yeah. And so that's a bit of my background.
Yeah, and Khushi, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thank you for hosting us. And hi, everyone. I'm Khushi. I go by they, them pronouns. I am an artist and engineer originally from Mumbai, India, and now based in New York. So I study my master's in strategic design. It's kind of very heavily focused on like research and like the why side of things on design. At Space Pride, I'm the vice president, and I sort of just do a little bit of everything at Space Pride. And we are more focused on being more inclusive through activism and advocacy in the industry. Which can be a little difficult sometimes, and we will touch up on it later in the webinar. But yeah, I am the co-creator of the artwork alongside the wonderful Ray, which you can see a sneak peek of. Excited to talk more.
Well, yeah, and so the webinar itself will kind of follow the story of this. I'll discuss how we got art on the moon, well, Interstellar Foundation and Space Pride working together with a few others, as it's quite the feat. Also, why this kind of operation is important, and also just a few steps, like if you're interested in science art collaboration, if you're interested in inclusion in sciences, what few steps you can do to engage with communities and do similar kind of projects. Before we start the presentation, I'd also like to introduce Jenna Sierra from the Interstellar Foundation, who can do a brief introduction herself as well.
Hi everyone, Jenna Sierra here from Johannesburg, South Africa. I am a marketing director for a nonprofit that does safety in schools, school safety protocols. And for Interstellar Foundation, I do the social media, some funding stuff, some design. All of us mostly have full-time, all of us have full-time jobs. And so we do this really out of the passion, out of our passion. It's a passion project, and we are all really honored to be able to assist in this endeavor, and so proud of the artwork. And Walton, Nick will try and pop in if they can. They both had things come up, and I got sick, and so yeah, but it's just so important for us to be part of this conversation and to make sure that inclusivity happens in space. And yep, that's me. Thanks.
Thank, thank you, Jenna. Yeah, as you can see, a lot of this work is very much driven by our volunteer work. EGU also is very much a volunteer, bottom-up driven organization. In fact, myself, most of my science communication work is also in my spare time. With that, though, I think we'll move on to our presentation. Just a quick note, if you have any questions for our panelists or about anything being presented today, know that you can enter that in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Just type in a question there, and we'll get to it after the presentations. And also, if you want to see this presentation again, it is being recorded and will be published on the EGU YouTube channel as well, probably next week. So with that, Ray, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm really hoping I remember exactly the layout of this presentation. So if I do this, it should go where I want it to. Amazing. So first and foremost, this is the art piece that's currently on the moon. We'll have a bit of more explanation as to where exactly on the moon, how it's on the moon. So I think what me and Kush have encountered quite often is that people are a bit confused what this means. Like, not just in terms of like the significance of it, but like the actual physicality and like the activity undertaken. What does it mean to put art on the moon? So this is a little bit of context as to like what is the piece that we're talking about today. This is our collaborated work that me and Kush have worked together on, which is called Humanity's Journey into the Cosmos. We're all made of stardust. We will outline a little bit more as to what kind of the symbolism and the meaning behind this art piece is. But for now, just to give everyone an overview as to what we're talking about today, it's this particular piece. I think it's also quite important to have a bit of an understanding of how we even got to this point, because many people may think that there's massive hurdles and massive barriers, which I'm sure they can be, and there will be for certain people or for certain organizations and certain endeavors. But to be really, really honest about how we actually managed to have this opportunity, it was through the meeting of our two founders. So in terms of our founder in Space Pride Protea with the founder of Interstellar Foundation, Nick, who had essentially kind of spoken together, grew an interest in collaborations, seen a lot of values and interests within connecting the organizations. And from that had this idea, why don't we create something for this mission that's going to the moon? What spurred from that is essentially that us board members were then tasked and asked, hey, is anyone interested in creating something for this project? Would anyone have the time, the capacity to? And at the time, it was myself and Kush, who not only did we have an artistic background within the team, we were also just really, really enthusiastic by the idea. Honestly, I don't think me and Kush actually took it insanely seriously. We were like, nah, I don't think they really mean it in the moon, but they did. And so we have spent weeks kind of coming up with all sorts of different brainstorms. We had, I think, 5 different sets of ideas in the end, of which we then presented to the community. So our Space Pride community, asking for feedback, thoughts, because as much as it is an art piece created by myself and Kush, it's also something that we felt very strongly needed the contribution of the community. And we wanted to be as representative as possible and have everyone's voices heard in this story. And so we had presented the different types of brainstorm ideas to the community. Ultimately, Kush's wonderful idea of a black hole was voted on. And essentially, we worked on this like nonstop for weeks. It was also during Kush's birthday. So like a massive, massive like endeavor, massive amounts of energy and resources spent on this. But that's honestly how we came to this point. We finished creating multiple different drafts of this iteration until this is what came out of it. And I think we're incredibly proud of how beautiful and how important it became and how much it resonated with people. We presented this during the IAC in Milan, I believe 2 years ago at this point, and a lot of people had such strong feelings towards it, some very positive and very affirming takes on how important it is that we have visibility on the moon. But again, more of this will be outlined in the coming minutes. So I will hand over the mic to our wonderful Kush.
Thank you, Ray. So let's talk a little bit more about Interstellar Foundation and the mission that actually got us there. So this artwork was a part of the Aspire 1 mission by the Interstellar Foundation. It's the first dedicated record, which is designed to preserve Earth's cultural and scientific heritage on the moon. And it's developed by a really incredibly interdisciplinary team of researchers that are trying to establish this new framework for planetary scale communication. I can go a little bit into like the image that you see here. So the pyramid that you see on the right is the one that was sent to the moon. Now the technology that was used here is called nanofish, which is kind of like a laser and engraved archival technology to preserve all of this onto a little chip. I actually got to hold a sample of this, not this exact dish, but a different nanofish disk when I met the LiveShip founder. And it's exactly this much. So you can imagine like the scale of this technology, and being able to do that with such precision is just incredibly amazing. In the next image, we have the Yes, thank you. So in the next image, you can see the plate that our artwork is also etched on. So Aspire 1 is sort of this huge collection of cultural and scientific heritage on the moon. So it has a lot of other incredible materials, and like even materials that I have looked up to, and like things that have inspired me to be an artist. And it's kind of really incredible to be sharing a space with such material. So some of the things are like there's like a daily life video showing global snapshots of contemporary life across the world. There are some UNESCO archives and World Heritage images, and then more selection of like scientific documents and historical content from across the world. And there's, interestingly enough, also a constitute project. So it's like a world constitutions as well. So the piece itself that you see here, that one is the engraved chips with all the visual artwork. And then it's preserved in the pyramid like that with the image that you see on the right. And then in the next slide, so you see on the right an image of the SD card. So over here, all of the other forms of data is stored in the SD card, and it's stored actually amongst plant seeds to preserve plant seeds on the moon. So it's also like stacked like that in the pyramid that you see on the left, and that's on the Blue Ghost lander by Firefly Aerospace.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Kush. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that? Because I mean, there's so much to say. Fantastic. And just to let everyone know, if you are interested in seeing the actual like entire collection of things that were like placed in these two artifacts, you can go into the Interstellar Foundation website under Aspire 1, and they kind of outlined everything that's in it. I think it's over 22,000 pieces of artifacts, but Jenna, please do correct me if I'm wrong. It's many.
Yeah. So, and also just something great about the Aspire 1 section on the website is that it's interactive. So you can actually click on the plaques. They're the gray plaques, rounded on the corners, and they pop up, and you can see the Constitution messages, the images, the all the things that were said. That's at interstellarfoundation.com, and then you'll see there the Aspire 1 heading or menu, and you can click there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jenna. We love when things are interactive. Like, anyhow, so Thank you very much, Kush, for outlining exactly what the format is, because now people have a better understanding of like, it's not just like this big canvas that's on the moon or a flag. It is these like iconic, very scientifically advanced, innovative pieces of, I don't know if machinery is the right word, but materials, I guess. Um, to go forward on that, where exactly are these pieces? So as Kush mentioned, the first mission was a Firefly Blue Ghost lander, which ended up in the Maricrisium. So that's kind of like the northern side of the moon as far as again, I am not a scientist, so scientists out there, feel free to correct me and call me out if I'm wrong. But it's in the Maricrisium area. This area is quite renowned for hosting several other previous landings. Some of the more iconic or well-known landings are, for example, 2 Soviet missions that landed in the 1960s and 70s. And yeah, now it's also home to the Blue Ghost lander. Beyond this, the second mission ended up being a mission done by Intuitive Machines with the IM-2 Athena lander, and this landed in the lunar South Pole in an area called Mons Mentone. What I really loved about this whole webinar is that I was not forced. I love doing this. I had to research a little bit in terms of like these locations and had all these fun facts. And so I think it's quite cool that the Mons Mentone was recently named after an African-American mathematician and programmer of NASA, just to commemorate her massive contributions in space. And so I think that's even more amazing that our piece is one of the contributions in something as historic as this area. And so for context, this is an image from the Space Weather Network, and you can see side by side the Apollo landing sites. And you can kind of see how these two locations are very, very different, very, very, I believe also incredibly difficult to reach due to certain qualities of the moon and launches and the landings. Again, science fails me, but this just kind of speaks again to the massive feat that having art on the moon is, and how it could have not landed. There could have, yeah, it just made it successfully in both areas. So yeah, again, big shout out to Kush on this, because they were the ones that like specifically located where our art piece, or rather the landers with the art piece, are on these two locations. So here in the Maricrisium, it's this little crater down there. We can't zoom in any further, so you'll just have to believe me when I say it's there. And you can also try finding it yourself in the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. I'm sure Kush will very happily explain how they did it, because I could not, I could never. But anyhow, and this is the location on the Mons Mentone. With that said, I think it'll be an amazing opportunity for us to also talk about symbolism behind the art piece, particularly because we do have two incredibly big vocal symbols that we used. And so, Kush, if you would like to begin.
Yeah, amazing. So the image that you see on the left, of course, of a black hole, and that was one of my inspirations when I first like started ideating for the piece, because I really wanted to be an astrophysicist. But then I tried to learn some theories, and I found it relatively harder than I thought it would be. But I got into this whole like rabbit hole of like, okay, what are black holes, and like what are the different phenomena? And then I started to draw parallels between how black holes are kind of like a representation of life and a representation of identity here on Earth, because everything that there is a phenomena called like singularity. I'm sure there are many people, many smart people in the chat who can talk more about this, but all of the matter that you see comes together and forms like one singular line. And I found that really interesting. So in a way, I kind of try to think about the parallels between that versus how we as humanity all try to be together. So like coming together no matter like your different forms of identities, because at the end we all do turn to dust. So I found that metaphor really interesting to explore. Do you want to talk about the pulsars?
Amazing, thank you, Kush. I feel like we also have to mention quickly that we have the slogan under Space Pride, we're all made of stardust. And so the fact that all of this cosmic dust kind of roams around and that our existence isn't just kind of like, it doesn't just end, you just change form, you transform into something bigger, I suppose. Was a beautiful idea. And also that's why we have like little stars all over our art piece as well. I didn't put stars here, but just as a shout on that. But yes, in terms of the pulsar, aka quasar is how I understand it. The quasar initially, again, as I'm not a scientist, I was Googling images of black holes and science and being like, oh, how can we like bring out this imagery? How can we kind of make it look realistically like space? I mean, as much as I don't think we necessarily, scientists correct me, see like exact rainbows in the way that we've depicted them, we wanted to make it as accurate as possible and really draw inspiration from the real world or real universe. And so eventually I came across this image of the quasar and I thought it was so beautiful. At the time, I just thought, wow, this beautiful emission of light that just kind of like comes out from the center, almost as if everything kind of catalyzes into this radiance, was such a beautiful imagery in my head that I thought, oh, why don't we include something like this? Not only because it is such a powerful kind of image of and a burst of light, but also in my head, when I looked at it, I thought it was such a beautiful sense and symbolism of hope and positivity and a brighter future, so to speak. And I'll speak more in terms of how the quasar are specifically used and utilized with the progressive flag, or the color scheme that we've chosen in the end of the day. So I'll get back to that in a bit, but essentially the quasar is, from what I understood, a significant astronomical object. So it's this luminous object that can also be seen as almost like a lighthouse, or it's, I think, understood as a cosmic lighthouse because it kind of signals the locations of these newly forming black holes. And it kind of comes and stems from the friction of dust and particles that kind of circle around and eventually collide and with the heat collide and then create this emission throughout the electromagnetic spectrum. And so what's interesting as well is that when we view it, we're actually viewing it backwards. So in a sense that we are seeing it when the light only reaches us, how do you say, it reaches us when we see, like we look back in time. Oh, scientists later, please explain this better. But basically it's as if we're getting a snapshot of the past, kind of looking back at us. So I thought like, this is also really beautiful that we can also see historically that this has such a massive significance. And yeah, I wish I had more fun facts about quasars, but I just think they look really, really cool. Beyond this, what was it? I read that it's brighter than, it's up to 1,000 times brighter than the Milky Way galaxy. So more fun facts. And again, that like emission, that radiance, the hope that kind of fills it. So I think what's very important, and of course also why we of course like wanted to have this massive symbolism for the queer community and wanted to make sure that we have as much representation as possible, is by the choice of the color scheme. So initially, the first idea and the first iteration of this art piece only had the 8 colors. So the original pride flag that was created by Gilbert Bakers Bakers in 1978, I believe, of which it was just the 8 colors. And we thought, oh, this is amazing, this is fantastic. But again, our organization and our beliefs are that there's such an intersection of multiple different types of characteristics that it's not just about being queer, not just about gender, not about sexuality. It also involves race, it involves age, it involves all of these like particular characteristics that I think are really, really important to highlight at the end of the day. And so kind of looking back at it, we then decided, oh, why don't we draw inspiration from colors from the progressive flag? So for a little bit of background, the progressive flag was essentially a second iteration of the iconic Gilbert Bakers flag. It was created by Daniel Quasar. Also, I absolutely love that Quasar is Zay's name as well. So I was like, oh, cool. And so it was theirs. their iteration of the flag, and essentially it's kind of it added on to this idea. It added on representation for people of color as well as the trans community, which we felt very strongly needed to be highlighted as well. So as I mentioned earlier with the quasar, we will go back. I'll go back to the image now, actually, why not? As you can see here, very prominently, we have the 8 different colors that you see in the iconic Gilbert Baker flag representing the queer community. But if you look closely at the quasar, and this is also meant to be like a very like subtle thing, but also like a very eye-catching, you should be aware that this is also beyond that. We have the people of color flag, the colors representing people of color as well as the trans inclusion flag included in the quasar. And I think it's also such a beautiful metaphor of how collectively we are there to support one another and we kind of uplift each other in the day, just as like the quasar is a radiance of all of the particles that kind of surround it. Sorry, I've spoken a lot, but essentially that's kind of a little symbolism background for this art piece. Kush, if you had any more ideas.
Yeah. I think like it does talk about togetherness and it does look at like harmony in a sense, but in a metaphorical sense, like similar to how black holes exist in the universe, like we don't fully understand what they are. And it's kind of like initially it was actually looked at this like unusual phenomena because it was drawing in a lot of like surrounding matter and releasing a lot of energy in the form of radiation and particles, but it may seem distant and it may seem very incomprehensible in a sense, but it's kind of very intertwined within the fabric of the universe. Like, I also see the parallels in between, like how black holes are treated as like an unusual black holes are a little bit of an unusual thing, and I feel like a lot of that is like the essence of queerness, because it's kind of a powerful force that challenges traditional boundaries and definitions in today's world as we know it. And I thought it was really interesting to use like 2 unusual phenomena, spring them together, and then they made it so much more beautiful.
I'm sorry, this was a co-creation, collaboration. We did this together, just as a correction. I'm quite glad in terms of like the reception we've had with this art piece. I think a lot of people have resonated really strongly with it. And as mentioned, it was seen beyond just this webinar right now. It was recognized by multiple different news outlets, which was amazing, but also like, oh my God, pink news. I don't know about you guys, but I was like, whoa, wild. But any case, I think something that's important to kind of bridge this conversation that we're having right now is, what does it actually mean? Like in terms of like, of course, we talked a lot about the symbolism behind it, talked about how we came about this project, but what does this mean on the broader societal, cultural level? How does it contribute to the LGBTQ community, the scientific community? Because that's exactly why we're here today. So I guess one point that me and Kush have been discussing is this idea of visibility. The visibility of the queer community as a very, very much present, very much we are here, we're not going anywhere kind of symbol. And I think doing research on this as well, it was quite interesting that this mission is maybe a handful or less of art on the moon. So another example of art on the moon is a tiny art museum that was brought to the moon in November 1969. And you might all kind of know or have heard of it. It's basically like a ceramic wafer the size of a postage stamp. And it includes kind of inscriptions and art pieces from 4 artists, I believe. I've written it down even. John Chamberlain, Forrest Myers, David Novros, Claes Oldenburg, Robert Rauschenberg, and Andy Warhol. And you might only know a couple of these names, hopefully all of them. But this was actually started by essentially smuggling an art piece to the Apollo 12 lunar lander by Myers. And I'd like to think it's a weird sense of defiance but also, again, just artists being artists, kind of breaking boundaries, making sure that they're heard and they're seen. And again, so from the visibility point of view, I think it's very clear that this piece is not geared necessarily towards the queer community, but geared towards representing that we are a community, we are a collective, we are also the human experience that is not binary, that is not restrictive. It's a very fluid experience, just the way that the space and universe are. Khushi, if you want to go on with representation with me.
Yeah. So a lot of, I think, space industry, because it's so inherently ingrained with like the MIC, and it's also very like a dual use technology. I think it's a very traditionally like a male dominated sector. And then there are many initiatives that are trying to change that across the world now. But like the foundations of the sector are very much based in something that was put forward by straight men per se. So trying to change the foundations of something inherently, it's a long journey, and it can be done by like, it's not something that can be done by like, one or two of us. A lot of us are doing various kinds of like representation and inclusivity initiatives across the world. And I find it really amazing that the space community does realize that and make space for it. But at the same time, like, let's take the context of sending this art piece, for example, like in today's world, because I'm sure this has been in works for like at least 2 years now. And life back then, while making this artwork for myself at least, was very different. I was actually working in like a steel manufacturing plant. And over there, I could not have imagined, trying to be my true self, or trying to stand up for who I am, or like what my identity is. So it came out in a way of trying to take up a space for myself through doing this artwork. So, and then at the same time, Space Pride was also happening. So together, I think it was one of the best decisions I've made to join Space Pride and to work on this. I think that got me through a lot of like different phases in life, and a lot of the team especially has seen me go from like a career transition and even a location transition and everything. And especially now in the space industry in 2025, we've seen this sort of trend of not giving LGBTQ plus communities the voice that we very much deserve to take, the space that you might very much deserve to take. So trying to do something like this with the support of other organizations like Interstellar Foundations and the EGU as well for hosting this webinar, it's incredible. We need more of this. We need as much of this as we have the amount of like tech and engineering conferences for space every other week across the world.
I think, Kush, you're incredibly right in terms of we need to call for more collaborations and more actions from people that also show that they are supporters, allies, that they also have our backs and that we can also rely on them at the end of the day. And I honestly, same sentiment. This is insane to think that we are artists. Crazy. And I think what's really important is also to remember that the moon, it holds such significance to people, that it is something that you look up to. It has been like our guide in the darkness. It has been our way forward and our hope and our aspirations. Upon doing research, I've also understood that the moon has a very strong symbolic meaning, particularly like again towards the queer community, connecting this idea of gender fluidity and non-binary identities to the moon. And to myself, it holds like a lot of meaning as something that I look up to, that is a constant to me as well, and a constant to many people out there. And so I think it's such a beautiful thing for people of any orientation, any gender, any characteristic to be able to look up the moon and be like, oh wow, a part of me is up there. I mean, a part of you is always up there because you're stardust. But any case, I think it's just a beautiful symbol of hope and remembering that you're supported and there are others just like you out there. Um, and yeah, I
It
think
also does
Khushi.
make for a cool story. Like I would go to like you could just on a full moon night go out there, hang out with your friends, and then you point and look upwards, and they're like, "Oh, I have something that's up there, and I can see it every night." Like that's crazy. I can actually see the moon from my room, so I've made a sort of like this ritual out of it, where every night, if it's a clear sky, I sit down for 15 minutes and just observe the moon and just like collect my thoughts and tell myself that all of us did this together. And now um, I think it's really incredible going from, oh, I love the moon, I love space, and I want to be in that, to going to something like, oh, I love the moon, and I have something over there that represents me, that I can look up to, and that queer people can look up to around the world, and, have so much hope and also joyfulness and celebration for a community to be able to come so far to do that.
Absolutely. And I think in terms of Space Pride, this was like one of our first biggest collaborations and feats as an organization because we were at the time of making this a small body of people. I mean, we're all also still entirely volunteers, but at the time, you can't imagine how small we were. We were, I think, like 5, 6 people. We've expanded to, I believe, 30, 40 plus people of sorts. But on creating this, this was one of our first um, biggest projects. And of course, we've done so many more things since then, like the Space Pride Fashion Gala, the collaborations with amazing artists beyond that, and all sorts of things. But I think this is probably one of my proudest moments working in Space Pride, being able to be like, we've made a dent, a big, huge, massive dent on this. So.
Thank you. That's very joyful to hear such a story. Um, I'll quickly round off the presentation section with um, just like a few steps forward for people interested in seeing what's next, and also I'll push these questions to our presenters as well. Let me just share my screen. Yeah, there we go. Let's just try that. So this is just a quick presentation on how you can get involved as someone perhaps listening to our artists today and thinking about what the next steps might be. Firstly, I just want to think about actually joining Space Pride. As I said, this is the first of a number of initiatives they've done, and a quite impressive one for one of the first ones. So if you're wanting to champion, I think, LGBT inclusion in the space sector, which I think is incredibly important these days with some of the big changes seeing in the sector, perhaps even thinking how to support that, get in touch with Space Pride. You can use the QR link to reach them, or perhaps just visit their website at spacepride.org. They're looking for new volunteers who want to help with advocacy, or even if you just want to perhaps be a better ally in the space sector, then I think this should be one of the first port of calls to go. Secondly, the Interstellar Foundation is currently gathering materials for its next mission. Currently, it's also collecting digital postcards. If you go to the interstellarfoundation.com and scroll to the bottom of the website, you'll find your postcard where you can enter, well, what would you want to say as a message to humanity or later. I suppose, Jenna, is there anything you want to add in terms of engaging with the Interstellar Foundation at all, and some of the initiatives they're doing?
Yeah, sure. So this is the postcard indeed, and we're collecting messages. It's specifically 280 characters to make it short and sweet, and also to kind of just if if you had a message that was either found by extraterrestrials, if they exist, or if you know, your views on what, you know, what needs to be fixed on the planet or what you love about this planet, it's a space for that. We're currently collecting for our Aspire 2 and working with some resident artists, and we're also a group of volunteers that started with just my brother Nick, and he had come across a the Voyager the Voyager records that went out into space, and he actually just wanted to send music to space and it just steamrolled into a huge thing. So we've got our space clubs that we're busy garnering funding for, which will help students in the global south, specifically in underserved communities, to um, for STEM research, sorry, for STEM education. That is on our website, I think, or it might have, yeah, that is on, that might not be on our website. We are on social media and on Instagram, on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, X. And we have something coming up in the UK, and the goal is to have a representative in every country at some point. And so there, if you go to our website, there's a place there to get involved, and to be part of our meetings when we can host them. Um, and that's pretty much what I've got.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. That was a good summary. Yeah, so visit Interstellar Foundation, maybe start thinking about what you send out into space, and also think perhaps joining their meetings and see what initiatives they're doing to try and kind of bring science and art together, which I think, and I'm quite opinionated about this, I think they're natural collaborators, so I'm always very happy to see more of these collaborations. Myself, I can talk a bit on the EGU side of things. We represent over 20,000 scientists in the Earth, environment, and planetary sciences. We have two scientific divisions. So these are networks of scientists in the planetary and solar terrestrial sciences. So if you're looking to kind of build community with scientists in the area, and this can be many things. It could be, for example, organizing programs at our once a year annual general assembly, which I think last year we had about 25,000 people register. It's a big conference, good for networking, good for meeting people. But it could also be writing blogs, etc. It could also kind of making sure you kind of contribute to the community in terms of science, keeping people updated with scientific research, or even helping people work with certain interfaces like the inclusion interface or the science policy interface. You might want to join these community of scientists, or even indeed link these other communities together. We have the EGU communities, we have Space Pride. I think they're very natural communities to be working together. EGU also has its own EGU Pride network. This one, again, is much broader than space. It's Earth and planetary and sciences, it's atmosphere, it's oceans, it's nonlinear processes, it's geodesy, etc. So this is a broader pride group. Again, these aren't silos, everyone works together, and I think that is very much the mode every community should be working with, kind of reaching out to each other. So you can join the network now, but it also have mailing lists soon, which do give updates on the activities, which include networking events, but also include blogs, for example. We do regular blogs from members of the community who discuss certain inclusion aspects in Earth and geophysics and geodesy, etc. And I'm certain there's space for Space Pride to perhaps contribute to them as well, actually, for sure. Beyond that, we also have some material ways. If you're a scientist, an artist, or a science artist, and you're looking to get support for a creative outlet, well, we don't send art to the moon, unfortunately. We don't have that kind of program, but we can support you. So every spring, we open a call for a public engagement grant. where we can give you up to €1,500 to develop your own way to reach the public through a kind of creative outlet. We've had benches that talk about the soul into your feet. We've had board games. It can be like up to your imagination, really. So we offer funding to help people with these creative outlets. But we also have open calls right now. So if you're a science artist and you're looking to perhaps get a platform to engage with scientists more in person, every year at our General Assembly, so this is the one with about 20,000 people. I think it was 19,000 people in person, 5,000 online last year. And you come to the General Assembly in Vienna and you develop art there whilst discussing and talking with scientists, building a network and getting to know like scientists' impressions of your work there. So again, if you're interested in that, the call is currently open. It closes this month, so you might have to be a bit quick, but there's still a week or so left. And finally, we also have a equality, diversity, and inclusion artist. The call is not open this year, but will be open again next year. And this is for artists, again, within the science sphere of earth sciences, planetary sciences, and environmental sciences, but focusing more on aspects of inclusion. For example, one of our previous artists this year focused on trying to kind of bring a face to misogyny or address issues of this kind of injustice against women in the geosciences, which you can see through her cartoons, etc. So I think if you're looking for next steps, there seems to be plenty going on. Interstellar Foundation, of course, looking for new material. Space Pride, absolutely your protocol for looking at LGBT issues or initiatives in the space sector. But then EGU also broadly has a large community which can be interacted with and offer funding as well. So I'll just stop my share there. And we have some questions, or time for questions now before we close in about 10 minutes or so. I think one question that popped in my head. Firstly, it's really nice to see there's a interdisciplinary nature here. I think when people think about the space sector, people do really think about rocket science, etc. But it's a bit of a misconception. There's plenty of different career paths in the space sector, including law, for example, including engineering, but including project management design. So it's nice to see that represented. But I was also wondering, you talked about like people's impressions of your art, and this is to both Ray and Kirsch. So how did scientists react to your art then at I think it's the ICA, wasn't it? Yeah. Could you tell a bit more on that? I think it's interesting.
So during the IAC in Milan, unfortunately I cannot remember names, but I do remember titles. There were plenty of professors in things like astrophysics and astrobiology. There were people in business. There were a bunch of people that essentially just came up and looked at it. They didn't verify the scientific accuracy of the art piece, but they did really enjoy the symbolism behind it and just the beauty of it, I suppose, because as much as we tried to be scientifically accurate, they really admired how we represented these scientific phenomena. And I think they were more impressed, or they were focusing more on what it symbolized as opposed to what it was, I guess.
I think one of the more key interactions I remember was this engineer from a company, and he was pretty old, well in his 50s, and he walks up to us and he walks up to our booth, and he's like, he looks at the booth, and we have like pride flags everywhere on the booth, so like it's hard not to notice. And then he asked us about what we do, and we shared about the artwork and space pride in general. And then he's like, I'm going to take a picture here and send it to my daughter, because his daughter is a member of the community. And he sent pictures over. He even took stickers with us, with him, and I find it very heartwarming. Like, it was a very heartwarming interaction.
Yeah, I think that's the best part of it. A lot of people were like, or a lot of people who I either identified in the community or were allies were very much like, "Oh, I need to share this with other people. Other people need to hear about this. Other people need to know." So really kind of spread like wildfire a little bit during IAC and beyond. So that was heartwarming.
I think that's always a nice reaction. I think, especially talking to perhaps more elders in the community. I'm not going to call 50s very old, but at least elders at least.
Sorry.
But I think part of it is also really nice to get reflections on people back in perhaps even before I was born about how it was to kind of work in those environments where we were less out. And also, I think it's good to kind of reflect on how Wyatt's part still kind of make sure these initiatives and things are still championed today, regardless of what happens. There's always this like fear of, at least me, myself, worry that is this the high tide mark of inclusion? But hopefully not. We need to kind of push back a bit. So it's nice to see these things reflected. And it kind of brings another thought to mind is I think all of us have had a fair bit of experience in working in inclusion and advocacy, etc. But I think to some people who are interested in joining in might find it perhaps a little bit intimidating or not sure where to start in that area. So I was wondering for those people who perhaps want to engage in the community or perhaps support and perhaps in working in the space sector or even not, like, do you have any advice or just thoughts to them as well?
I think the way I found my place in the sector was through volunteering for different initiatives. So I joined like a few different initiatives and used to help with like hosting community events. So I was a member of SGAC where I was the communication designer for the entire Asia Pacific region. So I helped host like community events there. So that like really expanded my network to a lot more other space people around the world. Um, it was also a very fun experience because you get to talk to people from different cultures, different time zones, and there's a lot of people like us in the sector who want to work in the sector but can't really find a direct pathway to do so. So I guess that was a good experience. You could also come volunteer for us because we always need more hands on deck to pull off projects like this. Because when we did this particular project, it was, I think, just 5 of us back then. So we are growing our team. Please come and support us. And also, I would say participating in more like, even if you are like the artist in residence opportunity that you showed, it's like really incredible. I would go for it if I were in the EU.
I cry a little bit every time you mention this, and I'm like, Kush, we have to go together. I cannot not. If I could, I'd bring you on the screen. And yeah, Kush is absolutely right in terms of really like trying things, I suppose. I think the way I've seen it is kind of follow your curiosity. In a sense that I never in a million years thought a hobby of creating art could ever culminate to this opportunity because again, I am by background an academic lawyer, nowhere near affiliated with the arts in a formal sense. But I knew I enjoyed it and I took a chance essentially. And I think that's one of the bravest things you can do in general. And one of the first steps you really need to take is kind of follow that brain being like, oh, that looks really cool. Or like follow your inner child. You know, I've recently said like read this thing of like people that follow their inner child are happier because they're experiencing something that is boundless, that is not restricted by like any fears and thoughts and like what ifs. So like dare yourself to go to a volunteer organization, even if you don't know anyone, because that's kind of how we Space Pride became a group as well. Like we were all a collection of complete strangers, aside from me and Scott. We knew each other before, but like aside from that, everyone else is just complete strangers. And with time, we've become like great friends. Like me and Kush, we call Panic every now and again, and it's yeah. So if you see something of interest and that even sparks like a tiny bit of curiosity in you, why not just try? Like it doesn't hurt to send an application, give it a yeah, give it a thought. Of course, like that's difficult in what we are, well, where we are and what affiliations we have, work, or our orientations can again be barriers to this. But then there are organizations like ours, or I'm pretty sure in the US there are a bunch of also organizations. There's a Pride in STEM that you could always reach out to. And so just know that everyone's on the same boat. Give it
I
a try.
think I echo the thought of a lot of adulthood should be rediscovering the childlike wonder and whimsy and just following that.
Exactly.
I think that's a good way to kind of think about it, and very much the way of a scientist as well. It's always, every kid starts out as a scientist with childlike wonder and curiosity, but it's inherent in everyone. So you just got to take that where it goes, and that kind of fills you up whilst you use that energy too. I think, like I said, like part of it is also just like finding the right people that work with you, finding people who get stuff done is one way I did it when I used to be a bigger, I guess, more of an activist in my academic days. But also recognizing some limits. If you're volunteering, people recognize that you're going to have to step into your capacities. So when you join something, that's fine. Just also communicate when that capacity changes as well. Yeah, I think I also just watch limits. I just a flashback is when I set my LGBT charity, I was also doing my PhD, and that's not recommended. Don't do that at all. So watch your energy. But Jenna, you want to say something, I think? Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, we're running very quickly out of time. But I just want to say, I think we've got about 2 minutes left. I want to say thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you to our speakers today. It's been a really nice exploration of science meets art, meets inclusion, a really nice kind of example of advocacy in a day where this kind of work is very much threatened. So yeah, I want to say thank you, everyone. This recording will be available online. But with that, I'll say goodbye and say goodbye to everyone else. Ciao, ciao.
Goodbye.
Thank you for
Thank you
everything,
for
Simon.
hosting.
Thank you.